Hello and a warm welcome to any Gold members and viewers who are here with us today. I'm Kristen Schwartz, licensed midwife and one of the MCs here at Gold. And I'm so very excited because I have a special guest here with me, Vanessa Simmons. Welcome, Vanessa.
Thank you so much for having me.
Vanessa, you are, of course, part of our Gold Lactation Online Conference 2025 that we get started with next month. It's just around the corner, really. I'm very excited about that. And you have a very important topic you will be presenting on resilient advocacy, practical strategies for breastfeeding supporters to thrive without burnout. Woof, that's a big one and so needed. But before we jump into this, tell us a little bit about your background and how you became interested in the topic of burnout here.
Well, as an advocate myself and as a mother of three, and someone who's been an entrepreneur for the last almost 15 years, it's easy to get caught up in, just the everyday life and things that are kind of overwhelming. Life changes up and down. And when you're going through some of the downs, it's really hard to bring yourself back up. And so, something that I've noticed, especially in this industry, is that we kind of tend to pour ourselves out into those who we're serving, right? Into the message that we're sending. And sometimes we forget that we can't pour from an empty cup. And so it's so
Mhm.
important that we kind of take time to step back and look at the whole picture, right? And look at how are we preserving ourselves so that we can continue to do this work long term.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Especially in this industry, if it is about lactation, childbirth, and such, we pour a lot out because most of us are in this profession, no? Because it's a calling. It's not just a job, right? And so it's so much more, and people are very passionate about it. They want, of course, to be of service. Make sure that the families get the best possible care. And many lactation care providers, doulas, birth workers, they all pour a lot in. And it's very easy to put yourself last, right? I think it's also a little bit of many women. That's what we grew up with. We care for others, and so that also is part of the issue, right? So. But you can't, as you also mentioned, if your cup is empty and then you have nothing to give yourself. Have you ever experienced that a situation yourself where you felt like, oh, I've given so much, I'm really, down now, and how do I get myself up again?
I definitely did. As the founder of the normalized breastfeeding movement, and that being a viral movement back when viral
Hmm.
was a brand new type of thing and
Yeah.
online creation was a
Uh-huh.
brand new type of thing, I really got taken over and really completely overtaken by the number of people who were reaching out to me, whether it was, to try and help me promote or looking for support or
Hmm.
people wanting to partner. Everything was happening at once. And I
Hmm.
had to learn how to manage things, but it was really kind of reactionary because I had no idea that it was going to blow up the way that it did. And so I found myself in a place where I was just so excited and so passionate that I just kept pouring and pouring and pouring. And then I finally just hit kind of rock bottom. And I started to see that I had poured myself out to the point that there was nothing left to give. I stopped
Hmm.
showing up on social media. I
Hmm.
would see messages and I would respond with every intention to try and give what I could, but I had nothing left. And I started to become very, apathetic about my advocacy journey. And I started to feel like, was it worth it? Was it worth all the time that I was putting into it? Right. And then I started to see that, my children were suffering from me being gone all the time, traveling, speaking, doing photography. All of those things were kind of pulling me away from the very family that I created that was the reason for me doing this work in the first place, right? And
Hmm.
so I kind of had to really, like I said, take a step back, circle back to what was the key purpose here? Why
Hmm.
am I so passionate about this work? And then start to slowly but surely build up again while preserving myself, while pouring into my own cup, right? And
Hmm.
then giving to others from the reserves, not allowing myself to get to empty again, but really
Right.
filling myself until I was overflowing with joy and peace and all of those things. And then pouring from that, right? Giving from
Mhm.
that overflow.
Oh, I love that. I love that, filling yourself up with joy and peace and then, kind of overflowing and using that. That sounds absolutely wonderful. So in your journey, you have talked to so many healthcare providers, IBCLCs, breastfeeding advocates. What are the common challenges that you notice what they face in their work, especially when it comes to emotional and physical burnout?
I mean, I think the biggest thing that we're seeing right now is we see how there are so many inequities in this industry, and it's hard to show up and be present when you can't really do anything about someone's particular situation, right? And you might feel very drawn to try and give what you can, even if it's more than what you normally give, overextending yourself and making yourself um kind of available when you really don't have that extra capacity, right? You're trying to create it out of nowhere. And so I've seen that a lot of times we try to build belief into others about what they can do, what's possible for them, instead of empowering them and showing them that they can do it on their own. And it's kind of a very fine line, right? Like we
Yeah,
kind of try to show up as the cheerleader, but sometimes we're cheering when they're not even invested themselves.
that is so true. Yeah.
And so it's just so important to know that kind of that boundary and to know like when it's okay to pour out and when it's time to pull back and let them make the decisions that they need to make for their best possible outcomes.
Yeah, that sounds like a very delicate dance, right? Like to know
Very
exactly
much.
when is it time to pull back a little, when is it time to pour, when is it time to, just be the cheerleader there and or dive deeper too, and especially I see in this area there is so many our focus is being pulled in so many different directions, right? There's so many fires that are burning, and we want to jump on everything, especially in the advocacy field, which makes it very, very complicated. And I feel like often we feel like there's so much that we feel, oh my goodness, little me, what can I do? And I feel like that's also where the discouragement often comes from because there's fires all over, and you come with a little, tiny little shot glass of something. That's how it feels, right?
Yes.
So, what do you recommend in a case like that?
I think that it's important number one to measure your capacity first, right?
Hmm.
And then, like I said, start filling your cup. Fill your cup up with all of the things that bring you the joy, bring you the peace. Not to say that you don't get that from serving others, you do,
Hmm.
but you're pouring out at the same time. So it's like you said, a delicate dance. You can't continue to pour and pour and pour and you don't take time for yourself to fill yourself
Hmm.
back up. And so it's so important to know what is my real capacity. I kind of measure it by like if I'm working with someone, right? And I start to feel it's the what's the right word? It's not bored, but it's almost like now I'm starting to feel drained, right? And if I'm
Right.
feeling drained, then I've gone too far. I've overstepped that boundary, and that is the place where I need to say, "Hey, let me get you some resources. Let me point you in the right direction.
Mm.
I can't solve this problem for you, but I want to point you in the direction that can, right?" And
Yeah.
knowing our capacity, I think can help us to kind of gauge a little bit better where we're overstepping those boundaries and overextending ourselves. And then that allows us to kind of keep that reserve for ourselves because
Right.
if we don't, I mean, everyone else around us is going to suffer, right? We're going to suffer
Yes.
definitely, but I think the thing that we care about more is that everyone else is suffering too, right? And so I
Yes.
think it's so
Yeah.
important to remember our capacity.
I love that about the capacity and also, the actual practical tip there, because to say, oh, if I feel like this is, draining me more, then it's time. That's my indicator for sure to pull back and then, giving resources and such. I think this is such a good practical tip that we could use because often it's so abstract, right? We know all this. Oh, do self-care, take care of yourself. That's all good and nice, but how do we actually do this? And that brings me to my next point. Often we are told, do something that brings you joy. Now, I've talked to many healthcare providers and they say, well, Kristen, I used to love knitting, or I used to love, I don't know, painting or something. But now if I think of it, and it feels just like another chore I have to do. So it doesn't bring me joy anymore. I feel like I'm so drained and so low. So, how do we dig ourselves out of that hole? I mean, that's a big one.
I mean, I think it's really important to remember all those things that used to bring you joy, and
Hmm.
then really just stop and try to envision yourself feeling the joy. And it might not come from doing that thing every day. It might be doing it a few times a week or maybe a few times a month. It might come from doing other things that complement that thing. Like maybe you like knitting, right? But maybe
Right.
the thing that really brings you a lot of joy and fun and like curiosity is going out and finding all the different colors of yarn. Like
Hmm.
maybe feeling the yarn in your fingertips is the thing that actually brings you the joy, right?
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Then you're able to connect with yourself and see like, oh, it was never the knitting in the first place. It was the feeling of the yarn in between my fingers. Right.
Interesting.
I
Yeah.
want to use this example. My son, the one who was on my back, the normalized breastfeeding movement, he actually, to this day, he still plays with clay as
Hmm.
if he used to, you know how when babies kind of like paw at the breast,
Yes. Yes.
he loves that. He's very tactile and
Hmm.
he has to have clay or putty around all the time. He says it helps him with his stress. And I'm like, okay, like I get
Yeah.
it, right? But
Yeah.
it's not that he's playing with the clay. He just loves the feeling of it in between his fingers. And I
Yes.
think that that's amazing that at such a young age, he realizes that about himself. So
That's
sometimes
fantastic.
he's doing homework and he'll have a little piece of clay next to him because when he starts to get a little anxious about
Right.
work, right, he just puts it in between his fingers and it helps him to kind of relieve that anxiety. So it's little things like that that we don't, we're rushing around all the time. We don't
Yes.
have time to really stop and think, what are those things that bring me happiness and joy, the things that fill my cup? Because we're
Yes.
so focused on everyone else and everything else.
That's so true. Oh, I love that when what you described there with your son and the clay, and it is wonderful for him that he is able in that young age to discover that and keep that, and that's a great tool for him for life for the entire life to come to know that these little things, but also for us to really look into, okay, what are the little things? Maybe you're right. Maybe it is that feel of the yarn. It is maybe just looking at different paints or how the paint smells or whatever it is, right? Like when we're or getting everything ready. So it's not just like the big output that we produce then with that hobby or thing or that, but just like the little things to enjoy that. I think that's very, very helpful. I don't want to forget, you are also an author, so show us your book, Vanessa.
So this is my best-selling book on Amazon. You can get the printed copy on my website, but the digital copy is available on Amazon. This book is my new baby, right? This is the
Mhm.
baby that I now have on my back. It's called Latch the Gap, the Powerhouse Advocate's Guide to Help Black Parents Know Better and Do Better. Now, the title, it throws people off. They think is it only for Black parents? No, this is because we have centered Black families because we know that they are at the top of all of the highest rates
Yes.
for disparities, right? And so
Right.
I've written this from my own experience, from the ways that I was able to navigate the maternal health system and
Mhm.
avoid having interventions that could completely disrupt our births and our breastfeeding experiences. And I talk about a near-death experience in this book when I was in postpartum depression and I had psychosis and I was hospitalized 4 times. And
Mhm.
so this book is really just to help advocates to know
Mhm.
how to assist and not fully pour themselves out so that they
Mhm.
don't have to deal with the burnout that comes on the back end of that. I talk about, the people who supported us in our childbearing years and how they were able to come alongside us, but they
Mhm.
didn't ever overstep that boundary, right? They empowered us so that we could seek justice for ourselves as prevention care, not as a traumatic experience, right? That we were trying to look for healing from. And
Mhm.
so that is one thing that I can say about my story that is very empowering for a lot of Black moms and a lot of moms all around the world is that I didn't wait for something bad to happen, right? I was stepped out, I was proactive, and I sought out that prevention care the moment that my OBGYN told me that 90% of their patients get epidurals. And I told her I wanted a natural birth. And then she just repeated the statement, right? So that was not okay for me. I knew I wasn't safe. I knew that I needed to take some time to do some research and look into some natural alternative methods for our childbearing years.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that. What a wonderful, sharing that wonderful story to prevent trauma, and that's what we really want for everyone, right? Thank you so
Yeah,
much. Well, Vanessa, it was so nice talking to you here, and I'm so looking forward to your presentation here at Gold. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
thank you.
And now some information for our viewers. If you are interested in this presentation, and which I can highly recommend, and into the Gold Lactation online conference of 2025, we would like to invite you to go to goldlactation.com. We also have a free open access opening keynote presentation that will be live, so you can sign up for that as well. And I hope to see everyone at the conference. Bye-bye, everyone.